hi. So, I just built myself a new PC here. Pretty much had to after Microsoft decided to force everyone onto Windows 11, and my poor motherboard didn't meet the requirements. But, I mean, it's just as well. Everything on my old PC was out of date anyway, so I figured just replace the whole system. And there we go. Now, I can do game development faster. Aha! Ha! Aha. Right. Okay. You got me. I'm playing Monster Hunter Wilds. It's actually the first Monster Hunter I've ever played, so new experience. But don't you worry. This is for research. Yeah, that's it. Research. Definitely.
Game demos. To the people who just play games, aka sane people, it would seem like making a demo should be as easy as taking a piece of your game and setting that piece on a sampler platter for all to enjoy. No special modifications needed. That might be true for some demos, but for us game devs, aka insane people, we know making a demo is rarely that simple. It is, in many ways, a mock trial of what releasing the full game will be like. Granted, the stakes aren't nearly as high, but the stress and challenge is still there, along with some special considerations exclusively for the demo. I've personally been spending the past month attempting to get my own game's demo ready, and even though I've been through this process before, I naively thought that, this time, it wouldn't be that hard. What a fool I was. But that story should make for some good entertainment, I hope. My name is Lance, working under the name Infinite Level, and I am making a psychological horror game called What Hides in Dreams, where death leaves scars. And this is what it's been like making my game's demo. As I implied a moment ago, this isn't my first rodeo with game demos. Both War Ender and The Future Project, two of my previous games, have demos, and both had their own unique challenges, particularly The Future Project. It's not that there wasn't some special tasks I had to do to get War Ender's demo working, but as a level-based action platformer with simple mechanics and virtually nothing carrying over from one level to the next, it was a fairly straightforward demo to produce. The Future Project, on the other hand, is a Metroidvania, which is a little more complicated. The demo for that game needed to offer a sense of exploration, and give enough powers to the player to give them an idea of what the full game would be like. It plays mostly normally up to the first boss fight, but since I wanted demo players to get a taste of the Future Project's elemental powers, I had to make a modified version of the first world that allowed the player to get the fire ability and actually be able to use it in a few places. Making a different version of the first world, of course, takes time away from working on the full game, and is a major factor in why I did not update the demo much after its initial release. I say all this to make the point that the process of making a demo can vary from game to game, but both of my previous demos, and indeed the upcoming demo for What Hides in Dreams, do have some things in common. They all, of course, require things like special menus, and there's the technical task of assuring only certain levels and areas are included, and of course, the ability to play well without elements from other parts of the game. And that's before we get into how much bug fixing and polishing must be done to release the demo in a presentable state. But don't you worry, we'll get to that. For What Hides in Dreams, the theory is that the game's structure and methods of progression should make the demo easier to make in comparison to other games like it. Level selection occurs in this nightmare house that the player finds themselves in upon falling asleep for the night. All you have to do is pick a door, and the level that door leads to will simply be on the other side. You play through that level or get killed by a monster, and then find yourself back in the nightmare house where you pick your next door. Rinse and repeat until the game is over. If I may toot my own horn here, I think it pretty neat. It's an organic way of moving the player from one place to another, acts as a safe space for players to catch their breath, presumably, and offers opportunities for storytelling in between levels. Importantly, it's also got the added benefit of not requiring much change to work with a demo. All I really need to do is tell the game which doors to lock away for the demo, and presto, we've got ourselves a demo. Mostly. Perhaps the biggest item the demo is missing in terms of content is a narrative ending. It may not be the end of the game, but ideally a demo gives you a satisfying experience while also getting the player to anticipate the rest of the game, kind of like a good episode of a TV show. I'd show you what I have of that so far, but I don't have anything. And why do I not have anything? Well, because I've been fixing all manner of bugs and glitches in the hopes that the game won't just die when you so much as press forward.
Drake? What? Where's...
Level. That leads us right into where the bulk of my time has been going for the past month. The bug fixing. And it turns out, there's a lot to fix. From minor hiccups like floating objects to more serious problems like levels not loading. I've been quite busy tweaking, adjusting, and outright adding elements to the game. So, let's highlight a few of these, shall we? Okay, so our first fix isn't really a bug so much as it is a new feature that gave me a surprising amount of trouble. Some levels in What Hides in Dreams requires that you find all 4 digits of a passcode, then enter those into a terminal somewhere in order to leave the level. Classic stuff. I'm pretty sure every horror game has something like this. But since this game does not have any kind of player-generated notes, a log of notes you've collected, or any other convenience like that, the player was just expected to memorize these digits. But this creates what I feel is a needless mental strain on the player when they're already trying to avoid death by a monster. Not to mention I personally have a horribly crappy short-term memory and figure other people will too. So I thought I'd throw players a non-horror themed bone and display the found digits up in the GUI, which should help keep the focus on the atmosphere and horror. Making the digit animations was the easy part. Unreal Engine's Witch and Blueprint tools are pretty easy to use, and by making some very basic changes to the digit scale and position over time, you get a nice animation for when a passcode digit was found. Add in a sound effect and presto, animation, baby! Where things get tricky was actually displaying these when the time was right. I had to go through my story note objects and add in new code to track what digit is stored and which number digit was. Since it's possible for more than one digit to be on these notes, I had to account for that possibility too. Then I had to go through all the places where story notes are referenced in code and add in the consideration that a note can or should have a passcode digit. And since notes with passcode information is generated at the start of a level and is not predefined, all these systems had to be prepared for the random aspects of these passcodes. Those considerations have resulted in blueprint graphs that look like what I can only describe as a very colorful Italian dish. But as for actual bugs, oh boy, where to begin? I couldn't place keys in drawers for the longest time, for one. Other times, monsters would suddenly just appear. But then sometimes monsters would appear when they were supposed to, but completely ignore you. Light models that were meant to be invisible were, in fact, visible.
The Void.
Frankly, think of anything that could go wrong, and it probably did. If this wasn't a horror game, I think I'd be okay with some things sliding. Oh, this physics object is continuously playing a hit noise? No problem. I'm a scrappy solo developer. I'm sure people will forgive something like that. But in a horror game, suddenly this becomes a bit more of a problem. Immersion is arguably the most important part of horror gaming, so you want as little as possible breaking that immersion. And this, well, that's a bit immersion breaking. Now I know I keep bringing it up, but the game taking place in a dream world does cut me a little slack because, well, dreams are weird, but I still want to keep immersion breaking things to a minimum. Then again, I'm sure somebody has had a nightmare where they're chased by a T-pose man. However, all of that pales in comparison to the behemoth that was saving and loading your game. Yes, seriously, this basic feature that has existed since the 80s is what gave me the most trouble. Saving and loading data in Unreal Engine is, in my opinion, not very intuitive. It involves creating a save and load object, which then reads and writes data to files based on what's in a different save and load object, and something called a game instance is probably involved somewhere. There's other stuff to consider too if you're streaming in levels like I am instead of separating them with loading screens, but fortunately Horror Engine does a lot of that work for me, right? Well, mostly. Unfortunately, despite Horror Engine's clear support of level streaming, saving and loading data doesn't appear to play nice with the tech. I had to go into the save and load systems of Horror Engine and make several changes in order to get saving and loading your game working correctly. This process drove me crazy, and now you get to hear all about it. But I must warn you, this is going to get technical fast. So, welcome to the inaugural Lance's Tech Talk! Okay, so the first problem was you load your game and then you spawn it to
The void.
Not a pleasant way to resume your adventure, whether in a video game or real life, but whatever. Horror Engine, thankfully, keeps track of the levels streamed to the game using a streaming cache. However, the original problem was that it would try to load in streaming before the game has actually loaded any variables, meaning it would look at the streaming cache and think, empty, and do nothing else. But in many ways, this is easy to fix. Just rearrange the order of operations and you're done. Except psych, new problem! There's also an asset cache, which unfortunately gets very confused when you do things out of order. Based on my tests, loading save data before any levels are loaded, which you have to do to load the levels which were loaded at the time of saving, results in a lot of null data because the actors the data is looking for don't exist yet. And why should it? We haven't loaded anything yet, game. Be patient. So now, the sequence requires you first load your save data, get the streaming cache, then load all the levels that need to be loaded based on what that stream cache says. Then, load the save data again, because some of these moronic variables couldn't have the gosh dang courtesy of just waiting for levels to load before fully populating their data. But once you do that, the save file is loaded, player is placed in their last save position, and then any object's individual load routines are performed. All is right with the world. Unless your level is big. If you make a big level, then Unreal Engine thinks you're in an infinite loop, because there's just so much stuff. And if you're not a coder and don't know what an infinite loop is, by the way, it's exactly what it sounds like, and you do not want it. The problem is the loop is not actually infinite. It's just that there's so many iterations on this loop that Unreal Engine thinks it's infinite. Now, I'm going to throw the Horror Engine creator under the bus here and say that this is their code, not mine. But I do unfortunately need to optimize it because right now when it loads data, it checks every single Horror Engine object for load functions. That is pretty unnecessary, but to give credit where it's due, I do kinda see the logic behind this. You don't want something missing its horror events after all. Still, it needs to be optimized. If it is not optimized, then I either need to split my large levels into pieces, which will probably get messy fast, or just not make bigger levels at all. And I don't like being told no, so I went in and optimized the code. Where things fall apart quickly is when Horror Engine checks objects for any horror events attached to them. So I cut down on the number of objects to search by dynamically adding tags to any object with a horror event attached to it. I made sure to do this in Horror Engine's Use class, which is the master class of all Horror Engine objects, meaning my changes will be sent out to everyone. And once again, for the non-coders out there, when I say class, I basically just mean object type. Anyway, that helped a lot, but it still wasn't enough. So then I added a toggle to several Horror Engine objects that determined whether that object's data needed saving or not. This was especially important for my lights. See, I have a custom blueprint called Light System that's set up with a bunch of controls so that I can choose whether it's a point light, rectangular light, spotlight, whatever, and then define a bunch of light-specific settings right in the editor without needing to place a new object. And it's fully compatible with all the Horror Engine functions. It's a very convenient blueprint for me. I often need several of these in a level, but don't necessarily need their data saved. Adding that toggle and then checking which objects can and cannot be saved did a lot to cut down on any unnecessary data. After implementing this, the number of saved items went from 1,000 or more saved objects to only a couple hundred at any given level. A huge difference. But guess what, chicken butts? We're not done yet! I also read that you can break up tasks using timers, so to further protect Unreal Engine from thinking too hard, I broke up the most intensive parts of the load game functions using event timers so that it wouldn't try to do everything at once. That was thankfully easy to do, but unfortunately a different issue with loading game data was more complicated and tedious. When you place an object in Unreal Engine, that object is automatically given an object name, usually the name of its blueprint class followed by a number. That works great most of the time, unless you're using level streaming. If you place two actors of the same blueprint class, one in level A and one in level B, and then stream in both levels one after the other, both objects will have the same object name. In many games that would be fine, since you probably won't care about unique object names. But this is a huge problem for my game since Horror Engine searches for objects based on their object name. Suddenly, a door you never intended to lock will be locked upon loading your save file, because the game is confusing the door in the level selection map with another door in the old house map. Now, thankfully, you can get which level an object resides in using this sequence of blueprints here. So I've gotten around this issue by combining both the object name and the level the object is in, then sending the combined name to the save file when saving your game. Then when you load a save file, the game will search for the object name and level combination before applying any data from the save file. And with that, barring any bugs with individual objects, I finally solved the issues of saving and loading game data. And now, we can declare our first Lance's Tech Talk finished. Whew! Hopefully they won't be so long-winded in future. This has definitely been one of the more frustrating and tiring months in What Hides and Dreams development so far. The issues with saving and loading data had to be addressed eventually, so I suppose it's better that it's taken care of now instead of later. In theory, this should be the end of these woes, which is great. But it took a lot of late nights and multiple headaches to figure this out. Frankly, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have a coding background. Anyone who's not a coder and having these problems have probably smashed their head into their desks by now. Some might see this and come to the old games are miracles conclusion, but it's not really a miracle. It's persistence, and stubbornness, and pride, and obsession. Maybe a dash of egotism too. Point is, even the most mundane things in your favorite games don't always come easy. As for the game's demo, well, that's still a work in progress. Now, I'm not going to be stupid and say all the bugs are taken care of, because they're not. But the types of bugs occurring are mostly less severe. I can't tell you when you'll be able to play the demo yourself, but I do think it'll probably be soon. Now, whether that's soon as in a few weeks from now, or soon as in whenever Hollow Knight Silksong releases, that remains to be seen. I've barely had other people playtest the game in private, so that'll need to happen first before any public demos are released. But after this past month's progress, I am definitely a lot closer to that than I was before. Now, if you'll excuse me, I best return to my work. I gotta at least work on the game some more if I'm going to justify my research time in Monster Hunter Wilds. If you enjoyed this video, then do the YouTube thing and press the like button and subscribe to the channel for future devlogs. Use the comments to further discuss this silliness. Some example comments you can leave include, "Wow, he's so smart for figuring this out," and "Golly, mister, you sure are a clever boy." And finally, wishlist what hides... That's so stupid. No one's gonna laugh at that. And finally, wishlist what hides in dreams on Steam if you find yourself interested in the game. Link for that will be in the description. Until next time.